Europa will be unlocked in less than a week, allowing us Guardians to venture out and find new secrets, enemies, and abilities. Today we're going to recap everything you need to know regarding the story before you play Beyond Light. We'll talk about things like the Exos, the Darkness, the Fallen, the Stranger, and much more. Alright everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and let's jump right into the video. So this is going to be a summary of what you need to know. I didn't want to make a giant video on every topic, so I wanted to keep it short and sweet with some little summaries. If you like to skip to a certain part, there's also timestamps in the description as well as the timeline you can scroll through in the video as well. Let's begin with the reason we're heading to Europa in the first place, a man named Clovis Bray. Now if you'd like to learn more about Clovis himself, be sure to watch my last video which details all of the Collector's Edition lore. It's a pretty long one, like 17 minutes, but it gives you every detail you need to know about that guy specifically, as well as the Stranger. Clovis Bray was a Golden Age scientist madman that was very self-centered and rude. He was responsible for the deaths of many people, and he just basically said, oh hey, they died because they improved my research. He also couldn't even save his own son who was dying. He tried to implant his consciousness into a new body, but didn't have the tech right yet. It was also worth noting though he didn't really like his son, saying that he was a flawed version of himself. Bray had constructed other creations and inventions like those on Mars at the Hellas Basin, as well as cities like Freehold. But this time things were different because he was dying, and his proposal to stop this dying was to live forever, immortality. You see, Bray had experimented on something called the K1 artifact, something that is related to the darkness that he said spoke to him, drawing him closer to the darkness. He calls this thing clarity, and he believed that it was the key to his immortality someday. After some time, Bray eventually learned that Vex fluid mixed with this clarity would create the Exos in a stable fashion. Exos were very experimental at this point and didn't really work, but with these two things combined, the first Exos were made. At least that's what we can believe, because things in the Collector's Edition cut off towards the end here. But we do know that we have Exos, so that's what we can assume happened. So Clovis Bray, crazy scientist madman that the Exo Stranger described his experiments as hideous. And speaking of that Exo Stranger, let's move on to her. Confirmed in this expansion's lore, we now know that the Exo Stranger is the granddaughter of Clovis Bray, known as Elizabeth, or also Elsie. As Clovis Bray landed on Europa, he wrote 3 draft messages to send to his 3 granddaughters, one of them Wilhelmina, one of them Anastasia, and the last one Elizabeth. Now we can see that he never sent the first 2 messages, but the last one did go out to Elizabeth, asking her to come to Europa. He said that she had this Clovis curse and she didn't have many more years to live. So maybe if she came here, they could both find a way to stop her disease and give him immortality and put their own brains into an Exo body. This was Bray's goal all along, of course, but he also wanted to experiment on other brain scans first to make sure that nothing went wrong. He didn't want to implant his own mind or Elizabeth's, as he wanted to make sure things were safe right before he did it, or else it'd be pointless and he'd be dead. Now, Elizabeth was very hesitant at first because of what happened to her father, who is her grandfather's son, the one I said that he didn't really like. So Elizabeth didn't want to end up like her father, dead because of her grandfather's mistakes. But like mentioned, the story cuts off there in the Collector's Edition, and with this information along with the stuff we got in Warmind, we now 100% know that Elsie here, or Elizabeth, is the Exo Stranger. So what happened after those letters? Now we are unsure until the DLC releases, but keep an eye out on it for sure. Either she agreed to become an Exo, or her grandfather forced her to become an Exo. This also leaves a big question next to it: what happened to Clovis Bray? Did he become an Exo as well? Is he still out there? Now many speculate he could be involved in the raid, possibly a boss. That'd be really cool to see a corrupt Exo version of him, but you get the idea, he could still be out there as well. To round that section up, the Exo Stranger's role in this expansion is to learn what else her grandfather was doing with the darkness, and also help us Guardians wield it for the first time, as she believes that's the correct step and thing to do moving forward in this fight between light and dark. The Fallen are the main advertised enemy of Beyond Light. We know we will fight Vex and maybe some other things as well in the raid perhaps, but the Fallen here are at their forefront with their leader, Eramis. Eramis has brought this ragtag group of Fallen to Europa to uncover secrets of the darkness and even use those powers to rebuild their own people, destroying whatever they need to destroy in the process. The Fallen have always tried to adapt to new tech. We saw this in Rise of Iron with the Splicers, and also the Scorn in Forsaken. So this is the same type of thing, but this time around it's bigger and badder with the darkness instead of Xivu or whatever the Scorn were doing back then. Variks the Loyal is the one who sent the distress signal out to the system. Apparently Eramis was mad at Variks because he lost something called the Splinter of Darkness. Now this could and most likely is the same thing we see here with the Exo Stranger, which in the collector's edition it looks like she gives it to us, which might be the way that we get our new powers. But Variks has always been on the side of humanity ever since siding with the Queen and the Awoken. He does of course still have that interest in building back up the Fallen, the House of Judgment, but it seems like in a safe way, allowing them to thrive alongside humanity instead of fighting against us like most of the other houses do. So Variks is back and does have a role to play here between light and dark. It seems he sent out this distress signal from this place on the map, and he will have a lot to say involving the darkness, I'm sure. The Fallen are not the only ones that are going to be wielding the darkness. We now are as well. The power of Stasis will be granted to the Guardians upon our arrival at Europa. Now the way we get these is kind of unclear. Either we're going to be going into some pyramid ship like this one, or it could be from the Splinter of Darkness. The idea of using these darkness powers is kind of controversial in the Destiny universe. Some characters believe we should stay away from it and even fight it if it comes near us, while others want us to interact with it and see what it wants. Maybe this could be good. These powers could help us. That's at least what the Exo Stranger thinks, right? Speaking of those characters who want us to see what it wants, let's talk about the Drifter and Eris real quick. Here's their descriptions from the Bungie website. Eris Morn, a survivor of unspeakable horrors, Eris is a former hunter who has dedicated her life to understanding and defeating the darkness. Now she answers the Exo Stranger's call and the lure of Stasis. The Drifter. Smooth talker, scavenger, hustler. The Drifter is all of these things and more. A light bearer from the earliest days of the Last City, he has long boasted of his connection to the darkness. For him, it's not about right or wrong, it's about survival. These two things make sense fitting into this puzzle. Eris has always been around the darkness with the Hive and all of that stuff, even on the moon last year's expansion with the pyramid and all that. And then we have the Drifter, who is always kind of sided towards the darkness as well, and it makes sense that he would want to experiment more and learn what it's all about. This season's storyline involves stopping Xivu Arath, a Hive god who is the sister to Oryx and Savathun, from building a new massive army. So us as Guardians are going to be sent around the system to destroy these cryptoliths, as they are called, with the help of a former character. Hopefully we will stop this invasion for good, as we know we're going to have a big Hive expansion next year, but it seems like that's what things are going to entail, along with some new quests. Surprise! Aldrin Sov is alive and now calls himself the Crow. The important thing to note here is that Aldrin doesn't remember anything. Guardians lose their memory when they get resurrected and don't remember any of their past. So Aldrin wakes up, he somehow learns to call himself the Crow, and we can assume that the Spider learns of this and recruits him to join his forces. This is inferred because of the logo on his chest, and also some cutscenes where we're going to visit the Spider. Now it's kind of messed up when you think about it. The Spider sends us to kill him in Forsaken. He gets revived later on with no memory, and now the Spider's like, yeah, I'm gonna use him to my advantage and make him work for my causes. Now it also appears that our Guardian is kinda angry with the spider as he didn't tell us that Aldrin was alive. We spent all that time killing him and now he just pops up. Bungie has stated though that the Crow's role will be helping us stop the High Celebrant from building Xivu Arath's army. So we have the main expansion stuff with Beyond Light and then the seasonal content with Xivu Arath and the Crow Aldrin stopping a new emergence. The good old Cosmodrome is back in its former glory with some new secrets and a new vendor named Shah Han. For those of you that are unaware, the Cosmodrome in Old Russia was one of the first locations you visited back in Destiny 1. Last year they brought back a small piece of this of the intro area for the beginner quests and new players, but now it's almost if not the whole thing, with some strikes and activities brought along as well. So next to Beyond Light we also have the Cosmodrome, and a bunch of new stuff is going to be taking place there. There is one big thing to note when talking about the enemies, and specifically the Vex. The Vex now seem to be in fight mode. What this means that the Vex on Europa are searching for or protecting something here that they normally really wouldn't. The Vex in general don't really want to fight other races or enemies unless they are provoked. But now it seems things are kind of changed around, one for the stuff on Europa I'm sure, but also two, Brother Vance sealed the Infinite Forest on Mercury, so that got them kind of angry. We also see some info on the Cabal. Some may be fighting to join Xivu Arath's army along with some Fallen and other enemies, and others are seen in a meeting here acting as bodyguards or allies to Osiris and the Vanguard. But Guardians, that's all I got for today's roundup of this story for Beyond Light. There might be some small things we missed, and if you'd like to throw that in the comments, I'm sure some viewers would appreciate that a lot. Anyway, be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on Beyond Light information, and I thank you very much for watching. My name's Evade, and I'll catch you Guardians in the next one.